Hey everybody, it's your pal Drew. I'm back from the eclipse. I went all the way to Waco, Texas to check it out. Long ass drive, but it was worth it. We got to see the full totality, 100%, and really amazing stuff. I'm sure if you've seen it on TV, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm back, even though the weather, the elements were determined to not have us come back to Atlanta. Just some crazy, crazy shit weather. Some comics are in my spinner rack and some that I'm just adding to my spinner rack. Now I'm going to jump right into it. What's funny about the Hulk in the 70s is they were really, the writers and the editors, they really refused to do guest stars that often. I mean, like the Hulk pretty much, a lot of these characters pretty much stood on their own, and they didn't have constant contact with other characters. I mean, now it's kind of trivial how everybody knows everybody and they run into each other as a guest star just to sell a book or something. But back then, it was almost the opposite, because there were some issues of Hulk I thought were just okay, and there was some that kind of dragged, and then you'd see the Juggernaut. I had this issue from a friend. A lot of the comics I got from way back when, I've mentioned this before, were from kids that were a little older than I was, and they kind of outgrew comics, because that's sort of what you did back then. So I was a beneficiary of this and the Juggernaut. Actually, I think my friend Brian traded this for me, and we just really dug the Juggernaut. So I think this is... No, this isn't. There was one they did a book and records, Power Records, but it's not this issue. It's a previous one, which had like the Rhino and the Abomination, two greats, and this artwork here, I mean, beautiful. Jack Abel and Herb Trimpe are a great team. Trimpe inked himself a lot back then too, but doing it on a monthly basis is tricky, especially when he does so much detail and such. Now, if you've ever seen they call them Trapper Keepers now, but I don't know what they called them back then. They were like these bound, how can I put them? They were stuff that you put your school notes in. They were about maybe 11 by 17 or something like that. And I remember seeing these panels being used on the image. It was like a Marvel collage of certain books. And a friend of mine in school had it, and I was so envious. I was so sick with envy. I could probably buy it online and stuff, but, I probably will eventually. So here comes the Juggernaut. We dug him from the X-Men days, and I didn't even know about the Beast, but probably our first exposure to Juggernaut, because X-Men was all in reprints at the time, and we just knew him to be a real cool-looking dude who was indestructible. So they teamed up, and then, Juggernaut kind of shows his true colors, and Hulk decides to stop him. Wow, I love that. Herb Trimpe did the desert and the military stuff so perfectly. And he had a military past, so he just really contributed a lot to this work. Not my helmet! This is so audacious, I love it. First contact, Juggy's first place. Probable point of impact. And then the X-Men show up. They went back to their old costumes for no real particular reason I can think of, but I don't know. One thing I do... Oh, Cobalt Man was cool too. Yeah, this was a real sweet spot for me with Hulk. Tony Isabella scripted it, okay. Usually, what was it? Steve Englehart was writing it for quite a while, and then Roy Thomas took over, and somebody else came out later on, but Len Wein, that's it, Len Wein. So, fun stuff with that. So, now for the opposite of fun. Beautiful Mike Mignola cover. One of his early gigs was, he did the Hulk for a better part of a year when Hulk was doing this Crossroads, other dimensional stuff, which you could find in the Hulk Epic collection called Crossroads, and it was kind of neat at first, but they dragged that for a whole friggin' year, and I was a monthly guy. I bought all these books, so reading them individually, it was okay, but I kept wondering, like, when are we going to get past this? And I had since bought the Hulk Epic, and first time in 40 years I read those stories, I'm like, oh, they're so tedious. Oh, you can't binge these issues. So what Mike Mignola was doing, first it was Sal Buscema, and then Mike took over, like, I don't know, the last few months or whatever. And then John Byrne decided to switch with Bill Mantlo on titles. They were doing the Hulk. Byrne wanted to do the Hulk. He was doing Alpha Flight. He created it, and they did a crossover, which is really cool. I'd love to see that, again, where they literally just trade comics, but they had a transition in the middle of it, which was the Hulk coming through from the Crossroads dimension into Alpha Flight's comic, and they had a fight, of course. This is the time when Marvel switched from metal plates to plastic plates, and they call this color process flexograph, and it's so awful. It's so garish. By pencils, Gary Talek is inking it. He was inking Sal Buscema on the Hulk for a while, and then now he's on Mike Mignola with this beautiful job. And Mignola, he's just a brand new guy. I read an interview with him in Amazing Heroes, like 1991, and I've never met him, but he seems like a real down-to-earth kind of guy. So there's a lot of heavy copy in here. Yeah, just a lot. You know what? Actually, if I was an artist, I would love this kind of script because you can just draw very little. Aside from that, you'll see what I'm talking about. The death of Walter Langkowski has drawn North Star and Aurora closer than ever, but only to find that cannot touch each other without negating their powers. Box is great. I mean, what was it when he? Long story. They had Sasquatch, and then they didn't. He died or something. Long story. And Box took the place, and I really liked it. It was more. I mean, Sasquatch was just sort of like your generic animal of the team who would turn, feral when he got pushed too far. And what was great was, the guy who created Box, he was handicapped, and I just thought it was really interesting that he, just treated like a person, not being, derided or whatever. And he was just a genius, and he created Box out of his willing, he wanted to have some form of mobility. So there's more blah, blah, blah going on. And then, see, Bill kind of forgot himself here. He says, oh, Aurora and North Star, poor kids. Never knew each other's existence till Mac brought them together, and now traumatized by the loss of Walter Langkowski and their alteration in their powers that keeps them from touching each other. They're more apart than ever. I'm like, you kind of told us that a few pages ago. Now, I like Bill Mantlo. I think he was kind of dependent on who was drawing the book, and Mignola was just starting, and you don't make waves when you're just starting. But I mean, on Cloak and Dagger with the brilliant, so brilliant, I don't remember his name, Rick Leonardi, and other books like Sal Buscema even, they gave Bill a lot of room to kind of mess around, like on the Hulk, and this is just a lot of la 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 la. And I dig Mantlo. The only thing I've never been keen on is his this issue of Alpha Flight. Look how much is going on there. I mean, it's kind of cool. I know I've complained about decompressed comic storytelling, but this is a little bit of the opposite. Like, this could have been some of the fat in here could have. I told you the main character Heather, she referenced the twins like more than once, pretty much the same way. And but the combo is kind of neat. Mignola would leave in a while to do with Mantlo doing the Rocket Raccoon miniseries, the very first book that Rocket had solo work in, and it's pretty interesting. And back then, Rocket Raccoon didn't have the attitude that he would have later on. He was more like a intellectual kind of guy. Long story. Giant-sized chillers I got. Now, I've said this before, a lot of the Marvel horror books were basically like superhero books, trimmed down to being not quite scary. Like, as cool as this cover is, wait a second, kind of zoom in there. There we go. We're going to zoom in, then we pull out. As cool as this cover is, it's just got that Marvel sheen to it. It's got that, whether it was John Romita or Frank Giacoya or somebody else, it just looks super heroic. DC's comics, I've said this a billion times, they had real earthy, real scary artists, like any of the guys from the Philippines, like Nestor Redondo, and so many of those great artists, and Bernie Wrightson. There are countless ones that seem to fit the book, like Nick Cardy, but this is just awkward. This is a script by Linda Fite, who was Herb Trimpe's wife at the time, I think. We got a newbie, Ron Wilson, inked by Jack Abel, and this came out in end of around Christmas time. It was dated May 75. That's just how books were done way in advance. And this isn't, there's a lot of stodginess, and I can't imagine anybody starting out with. I mean, the script is kind of pedestrian, and it's not anything against Linda. She probably had limitations with the comics code. That's why they had to make everything kind of have that same superhero feel to it. They were playing it safe. Anyway, it's just not very scary. And this is a reprint, but it doesn't say where. I could be wrong, but it looks like either one of the Filipino artists or I don't know. I love this art because it's very advertising. Like it has that look from like the 50s and 60s advertising art. So I have no idea who did that. And Paul Rainman. Now this is a late time Paul Rainman. He was around. He inked Kirby in the early 70s, and in the 50s he worked for Stan Lee doing horror stories and suspense stories. And Don McGregor, who had done, he was well into his Black Panther run, and he had done some, I think, Luke Cage Power Man as well. Maybe I'm mistaken, but the art's kind of not that strong. But Rainman, he works it. He's still a solid storyteller. But I don't know if he lived much after this. But he was pretty good. He did some of the MLJ stuff that came out in the 60s that was kind of wonky, where they were the Mighty Crusaders were trying hard to be the Avengers, and it just wasn't working. This is a reprint, and I'm not certain who did this. But anyway, it's a combination of the two. It goes into other artists I don't know, although this really reminds me of parts that remind me of Bill Everett. I'll show you what part. Okay, like this, like these guys, and the way the smoke effect goes, but I might be wrong. But this is definitely Don Heck, who is excellent. Somebody else. So it's a mixed bag. And what's weird is I don't have any Ditko in here, but there's plenty of other cool stuff. But so I just bought this just to. I'm starting to collect the giant size comics because there were a finite amount of them published, and I can't believe Marvel didn't make a fortune off of them, because I know so many people like myself who loved them. But what I learned later is that during this time, Marvel, the owners of Marvel, above Stan Lee, they really didn't know what they had. They just had comics, and they were kind of like, yeah, and they didn't invest any money. They were just kind of going along. I didn't even think of like intellectual property, because movies and stuff like that were so rare in the 70s, and when they were done, it was best they weren't done, with the exception of the Hulk TV show. So I got this recently. Spine roll's pretty intense, so spine rolls when the spine rolls. I gotta see if I can straighten that out. Now, Return of the New Gods, which is shortly, listen to my voice. Ooh, see, I'm a little wonky from the travels, so if I sound off, that's because I'm fighting a cold. So if my voice gets up here, well, they bring back the New Gods, which had okay, this isn't the continuation of it. The last Kirby issue, I think, was 11 at the time, and they did do a 12, but before then they used this first issue special, which Kirby had done a lot of one-shots, and other people had, because they wanted every issue to be a first issue. So it was kind of a, hey everybody, hey fans. So this is Orion. It's very odd. It's a really weird makeover, and he's too super heroic. Although, as a kid I thought it was kind of cool, but it wasn't riveting. I mean, the story post Kirby, it's Jerry Conway and Mike Vosberg, a very young Mike Vosberg. I guess he's inking himself. I'm not sure, but dialogue by Danny O'Neill. So this was brought together strictly. See that 30 cents price there? This was slammed up because Kirby had gone back to DC, and he left DC to go to Marvel, back to Marvel, and he was doing the Eternals, but originally it was called Return of the Gods. It even had a logo that was a little too much of a knockoff of Food of the Gods, something, I can't remember that name. But anyway, this was basically put out there because Kirby, if he had changed name to the Eternals, and it was sort of like a, hey, watch it, pal, don't get too close to what you gave us DC. If you're going to Marvel, that's not your toy anymore to play with. So, I mean, it's cutthroat, but that's the way it was. Dialogue's kind of weird, though. He's like, I won't bother to knock. Orion has never had a sense of humor. I mean, his idea of a sense of humor would be like if he saw a pile of bodies falling down a hole on spikes. Now, that would be his sense of humor. So, just weird stuff. Mike Vosberg's always been a mixed bag for me in comics. I mean, he's a much better artist than he does with his comics. It's almost like he dumbs it down. I don't know. Hi, Father appears bored, Scott. No, I mean troubled. And it's weird. Orion just doesn't have... it's hard to find somebody with the right voice for Orion. At the time, everything was superheroes from 76. Oh, another thing, too. Parademons, they got kind of turned into just lizard beings with helmets, where before Kirby's parademons were just amazing. You know what? Maybe that's why they also changed this. Maybe it was a kind of a thing to say to Kirby, hey, we still own Orion, and this is that version of Orion. And I know I look through comics through the lens of legalities, but you look up back when Wonder Man came out from DC, from Marvel. DC tried to sue, or they had a cease and desist because they had Wonder Woman. And when Power Girl came out in 1976 from DC, Marvel decided to bring back Wonder Man. Long story, even though Marvel had Power Man. You get all that? I didn't. There we go. This is really fantastic. It's a really amazing book. A little bit of Neil Adams' public service page. And you see, it's just kind of... you can tell Vosberg's not really into it, but I think he's really new to comics, and he's just kind of like, because that is so not... That's really bad. But I mean, there's a new kid on the block, his stuff would get stronger later. And he's done like great illustrations. I just think his comics shorthand isn't as strong as it could be. I mean, yeah. Did I say it right? You will not believe, will kill, girl. But he didn't get on his ugly Orion face like when he got really insane. Kirby drew him with his like really messed up features. Well, anyway, speaking of Kirby, this is the last issue of Captain America before Kirby came along, returned to Marvel. And it's quite an interesting difference from Frank Robbins, who was doing Cap for about 6 months or 8 months. Go from this really wild, fleshy kind of cartooning to this real blocky look. And at the time, I thought, wow, this is great. This looks like... my Tales of Suspense reprints and Marvel Triple Action. This is Marv Wolfman serving as writer-editor for this issue, just to get it out of the way. That's what they did a lot. Bruce D. Berry over Frank Robbins is really interesting. I don't know a lot about him, but he did ink some Kirby around this time. I think some of the... I don't know a whole lot of him, a whole lot about him. But I do like his style. It's smooth, and yet it's not as... like Frank Springer came along in the Invaders, and years later I realized that was a much better matchup with Frank Robbins. But at the time, was a Vinnie Coletta kind of simplified some of the Robbins stuff to make it look... It would fit into the Marvel style, house style. So... But D. Bruce Berry is kind of a mystery to me. I don't know. Very first appearance of... Moonstone, the female version, Dr. Carla Soffen, I don't know what her name was. But this book might be worth a lot of money. And Steve Rogers doesn't realize he's on a plane full of hoods, troublemakers. This guy has a gat in his boot. It is a hot platform shoes. Believe it or not, platform shoes like this were very common. It wasn't just like rock stars. It was just, goofy, but platform shoes were in. And, again, it's kind of weird, the cartooning where Frank Robbins, he's an adventure strip artist. He's not a superhero artist. And, but he does, what I like is, in this panel, there's a lot of suggestive movement on the jacket all the way to the glove on the other side of the panel. It's really nice stuff. But, some of the poses are kind of wonky. And, like stuff like that. Really crazy stuff, like upside, where the limbs would sort of go all around each other. I love it at the time. Well, some of this is just really wacky. And I know he's trying to get into the Marvel House style of action anyway. And, I do like it. Even though I told myself I hated it, it's like the story was still great. And, some Robin still comes through. Look at that blue. Look at the coloring is way off register. That's the way it was. Okay. And there were a lot of people that were really rude about Frank Robbins at the time, but a lot of them were saying, "Hey, the king has returned. We're excited." Oh, ooh, a Marvel value stamp. Let me get my scissors out. Just hanging there. Okay. I don't know if I had this one before. I'm just putting you on. I did that in a previous episode, and it was annoying to one of the viewers, and I get that, So, really wild stuff here. Wacky. Okay, here we're going to zoom on in, everybody. There we go. And Dr. Faustus gets sucked out of the decompression because Mr. Gat in my boot. He also has one in his hat. So there's a whole decompression. Dr. Faustus flies out of it. Now, that is excellent. That is just really what I would imagine. Get in there. Yeah, it's real wild. I can't quite describe D. Bruce Berry's inks. I do find them interesting, and I don't find them really bothersome, but so he fakes them all out by saying Flight 911, and this is way before 911 became very common knowledge. This is the 70s, and it was like till the late 80s or whatever that 911 was around, and public, what is it, that figure's so neat though. And the clothes seem strange, but that's exactly how it was back then. There was a lot of people bare skin, there was if you look at old footage of ladies walking down the street with a bra top and jeans, and not a bra top, like a halter top, and that was just it. A lot of people had their I saw an old picture of my dad from the 70s, and he had like the open shirt with the necklace and stuff hanging down. It was like a disco thing, and that's it. This cover's knockout. It was also at the time Ramita. This is pure Ramita. One thing I love about it is there's no UPC code there, but if this was ever reprinted in a single book, it would probably have that. But also, it's like Marvel's covers, like with Ramita, of course, and then Gil Kane. You'd have this beautiful cover, and then inside, it's like almost no matter who was doing the art, it was always a disappointment because the cover was like what dragged you in, and that's the way it was. So anyway, I hope you like this return, and I got more funny books to share with you, and I'm back. I'm going to be pumping some more out, and have a good day, everybody. Bye.